Today's webinar on the FDA CBER Mini-Sentinel program is sponsored by FDA's Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. The Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, or CBER, regulates the manufacture and distribution of biological products that are for human use. These products include blood and blood products, vaccines, allergenic products, and cells, tissues, and gene therapies. I would like to introduce today's presenter from CBER, Michael Wynn, MD. Michael is the Deputy Director of the Division of Epidemiology in the Office of Biostatistics and Epidemiology. In today's webinar, Michael will explain the role of the Mini-Sentinel program within the framework of the Sentinel Initiative as it pertains to CBER. There will be time at the end of the webinar for questions. Slides from today's presentation are available at fda.gov/FDA Basics. An archived version of today's webinar will soon be available from the same web address. Now, I'd like to turn to Michael, who will begin the presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Wynn. I'll be talking today on FDA CBER's Mini-Sentinel program. The plan for this talk is twofold. The first half of the presentation, I'll describe the basics of Sentinel. I will discuss the origin, rationale, and components of the Sentinel initiative, give a little bit of the characteristics of the distributed database, and talk about the available analytic tools that have been developed thus far, and our commitment to transparency in operations. Because this is such a short talk and Sentinel is such a big operation, I'll end the talk by talking about other key sources of information where you can continue to understand the project, progress to date, and keep apprised of any current projects and any new results. This slide shows the components of Sentinel. The Sentinel initiative has two major components. The first on the right here is the Federal Partners Collaboration, which is made up of the Department of Defense, the Department of Veteran Affairs, and Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services. These are federally held databases and will not be the focus of this discussion. This discussion will focus on the second part of Sentinel, the initiative, which is Mini-Sentinel, which is a collaboration of data partners, academia, and nonprofit organizations. It covers all FDA-regulated medical products. Within Mini-Sentinel, there are two effector arms that are within CBER's mandate. The first one is the Prism program, which is the post-licensure rapid immunization safety monitoring program. And the second one is Bloodscan, which is Blood Safety Continuous Active Surveillance Network. This slide will show the Sentinel's basics. Sentinel is FDA's post-market risk identification and analysis system. It was created from a congressional mandate in the FDA Amendment Act of 2007. As I spoke before previously, Bloodscan is CBER's program for blood and blood-derived products, whereas Prism is CBER's program dedicated to vaccine safety. Sentinel is comprised of a distributed database with 18 data partners. These are health insurers, principally, such as Aetna, Humana, and Kaiser Permanente, that in aggregate total 178 million individuals under surveillance, 48 million of which are currently enrolled with medical and pharmacy coverage. The data partners importantly retain control over their own data, and the analytic programs are run against a common data model. And this ensures that there's patient privacy and that the minimal amount of personally identified information is shared in order to enable the analyses. Within these 18 data partners, we do have access to laboratory, pharmacy data, and medical records for our analyses. This slide is an article entitled The Growing Role of Epidemiology in Drug Safety by Margaret Hamburg. I just wanted to point to you to the first sentence as it details of really the genesis of the Sentinel program, which is that for the for the U.S. Food and Drug Administration having the capacity to monitor drug safety in the post-market environment under conditions of actual use is as essential to ensuring patient safety as evaluating initial clinical trial data in the pre-market setting. So this is really the commitment by FDA to not stop at licensure, but to continue to ensure the safety of our medical products in the post-market setting. And so there are limits to the clinical trials and spontaneous reports. In the context of pre-market review of human drugs, FDA does rely on extensive preclinical testing, human pharmacology studies, and clinical trials. And this represents the first tier of knowledge about the safety of medical products. The clinical trials, which are designed primarily to demonstrate efficacy, are also able to characterize and quantify the most common, but not necessarily the most serious or clinically important adverse events in medicine. And for over the last 4 decades, FDA has relied on spontaneous reports to identify previously unknown risks of medications after a drug is brought to the market. But although such reports are important to the identification of rare, serious drug-induced events, and they are not sufficient. And that's where Sentinel provides a vital role in the suite of tools available for FDA. So I just wanted to turn my attention now to descriptions of the Mini-Sentinel distributed database. As I said before, this is comprised of 18 different data partners and 178 million individuals under surveillance. I'm just going to turn to the summary report for year 4 that's available online publicly at the site below from August of 2014. And so here you'll see that the Mini-Sentinel database by age group. You'll see that approximately 35.4% of the database are comprised of individuals 22 to 44 years of age. And the 45 to 64 years of age is 26. Those are the 2 biggest categories. And as you go down in pediatrics, into the pediatric rates, they make up smaller and smaller percentages. One thing to note is, if you compare this to the U.S. Census data, these data are pretty comparable within 1 or 2 percentage points. So while we can't say that they're nationally representative, they do align well with the U.S. The overall U.S. population. This is the Mini-Sentinel database by medical coverage. You'll see here in the yellow the population that contains medical and drug coverage, and the population green that was just drug coverage. And you'll notice that the majority of unique individuals under surveillance starts to increase beginning around 2006 and really starts to take off around 2008 to 2012. And that's really where the bulk and the strength of our database come in, is through those years. This is the Mini-Sentinel distributed database by sex. Reflecting the overall U.S. population, there's slightly a higher percentage of females than males. And this shows the Mini-Sentinel database by race and ethnicity. And here you'll see about 30% of the population are white, and a significant amount, 62.6% here, are unknown. And this starts the conversation about the limits of the Mini-Sentinel distributed database, and that is that it's made up of administrative data. And I'll take the next slide here about administrative data. Administrative data are collected for billing purposes. This is data that reflects the filling of prescriptions, procedures done in the midst of a healthcare encounter, or hospitalizations. And so what appears is really what gets reimbursed. And so that's functionally one of the limitations of the administrative data. And it also gives an understanding for why we need chart review and chart access for many of our studies. This table 1 shows you the list of just a short list of those administrative codes for certain health outcomes of interest that are really accurate, have very good positive predictive values of greater than 70%. So stroke, heart failure, venous thromboembolism, these are administrative codes that are quite accurate. And so when we do a study, we can one might say we have a better chance of doing it absent chart review. Now you move over to the far left-hand column with little utility, things like acute respiratory failure, pulmonary fibrosis, lymphoma. These are things that if you wanted to use these codes for safety surveillance, you really need chart review to be confident in the results. This slide shows shows two of the four main Sentinel analytic tools. There are summary tables, which are menu-driven querying based on pre-populated aggregate counts, and these are really just to tell you, are the codes populated in the database or not? Are they actually used? They provide simple code counts. There's also modular programs. These are predefined, validated programs that allow you to characterize the exposures and outcomes and create simple adjusted rates. And I should say, the real value of Sentinel is to put this in the context of what we had before Sentinel. Without Sentinel, all we had principally at FDA was passive surveillance. It was FAIRS and VAERS, where all you had is people writing their experiences of adverse events and reporting it to FDA on a case-by-case basis. And what you were missing there was the total number of people who were actually exposed. And so what we call in the industry denominator data. And without that denominator data, you can never tell what exactly is the incidence rate or the true rate of those adverse events in the population. And that's the major advantage of Sentinel. And you start to see that here with our modular programs. All right, so then you move on to prompt. These are also predefined analytical programs, but now you take it one step further. The other ones you look backward in time, retrospective analyses. Prompt allows you to look sequentially and look forward in time. And that's what allows you to do near real-time active surveillance. And the prompt modules available to us have quite strong confounding control. And they involve things like propensity score, confounding control, and self-controlled analyses. And then you move to the last and final thing. And this is, as you move down this table, you move down in terms of increasing confounding control, increasing certainty. And these are the protocol-based assessments are customized protocol-driven studies with pre-specified objectives, maximal confounding control, and usually chart validation, depending on what you want to investigate. And these allow you to fully customize large-scale epidemiologic evaluations. And so as we start to develop the Sentinel program, we're now entering year 6 of the program, and we're committed to operating this in the most transparent way that we can. And here are some ways that we do it. FDA will post all study protocols for public review. That means that all the protocols are pre-specify the objectives in the analysis plan. FDA will notify manufacturers of any product that is subject to analysis in advance of the planned posting date, so they're aware of it. And then there's a 14-day public comment period, and all public comments are carefully reviewed by FDA and investigators. If revised, FDA will repost protocols after the public comment period. Additionally, FDA will post the analysis code used in the studies, and so. For those who are interested in how exactly was that regression model constructed, you'll see it. And finally, FDA will post final study reports even before publication, so you won't be limited by the word count of most medical journals. We will make the final study reports as detailed as necessary to communicate all of the analyses and the sensitivity analyses, etc. And often this will be accompanied by an FDA safety communication. All right, so let's take a look at our first study that was published. This is the FDA safety communication that shows the release of the final study results from the observational study of rotavirus vaccines and intussusception. This was posted on June 13, 2013. And it gives you a full background, gives you a purpose, and it gives you, most importantly, the take-home points of the analysis. And let's see how the media has responded to this. So this was in the Boston Globe, and as a result of our study, you'll see the line here, rotavirus vaccine improved, studies find. And if you read down, it says, newer vaccines against rotavirus, a severe diarrheal disease in children, slightly raise the risk of a rare bowel problem. that doomed an earlier vaccine, new study shows. That's the intussusception. That's the telescoping of the bowel and the bowel obstruction. But researchers say the modern vaccines, these second-generation vaccines, are much safer and well worth this very small risk. And so what you're seeing here is that when you have a capability like Sentinel and you can have better assessment of risk, it can and does strengthen the confidence in our vaccines. So where do I find more information about our Sentinel activities? Well, here's the Mini-Sentinel website, and you'll see the exact link below. And here you can find things like their background, the descriptions of the distributed database, a full list of collaborators, and their principles and policies. I just want to turn you to one portion of this Mini-Sentinel website with the link here below that shows our CBER studies and projected timelines. This gets updated about every 6 months and shows you all the protocol-based analyses that we're doing. So if you want to know what exactly is CBER studying, the list is on here. And most importantly, it'll give you 2 major milestones. You'll get a sense of when do we think the protocol is going to be posted if you want to know what exactly we're studying and how we're doing it. And then when are we going to be able to see the final report? And we'll be able to project the final report posting date here. So again, this is a nice area of the website to focus on. All right, so another portion of this is to find more information is the Brookings Institution Sentinel Initiative events, and it'll list them here. There's great things like expert stakeholder conferences. There's public workshops which you can attend and see and meet investigators in person. There'll be roundtables, which are webinars online, and active surveillance implementation meetings. Here there's a slide on the Brookings Sentinel Initiative Public Workshop. This is annual, and you'll see here this happens usually in January or February. And on this link, you'll be able to see videos of the presentations. And then if you miss the videos, you can even find the actual slides in the meeting agenda online. And although it's hard to see in the top right-hand corner where it says 13 more, that's where you'll see the 13 different presentations that were done. So another great place if you're not able to travel to DC and see the public workshop. And so it might be hard to keep track of all these things. You don't want to go to the Mini-Sentinel website every day or every week or every month. You might want to just say, can someone just push and send me an email when something major is happening with Sentinel? And the answer is yes. And you can go to this website and sign up for the quick email updates. And this is a distribution list. And put your email in, and we will email you when a major activity is going on that you can participate in. So you might say, okay, well, great, publication, conferences, the website. Well, I want to know more actual science. Well, there are 2 major key journal supplements that we've published. The first one is in the Epidemiology and Drug Safety Supplement. This contains 34 different scientific articles covering 303 pages. It is available free online on this link. So what will you find there? You'll find great articles like this one by Richard Platt that describes the status and direction of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's Mini-Sentinel program. You also get a nice article by Susan Farrell about the organizational structure and governing principles of the Mini-Sentinel pilot program. Now, if that's not enough and you want to know more about what CBER is actually doing, CBER has also produced a Mini-Sentinel journal supplement. And this one has 12 different articles and 112 pages. And there's 2 probably high-level ones that are of interest to folks. The first is the systematic scientific review of vaccine safety outcomes of interest. This is a survey of the literature to figure out what is the quality of the codes for certain outcomes of interest that are of interest for vaccine safety, and how accurate are they? Well, does it tell us that it seems to be possible without chart review, or do you think we will need chart review? And that's a nice it's a nice set of articles about it. The other is the characterization of the Prism database itself, and that information is all online here. Again, I just want to point to Melissa McFeeder's great article here on the methods that were used for these systematic reviews, and it summarizes the literature in more than 5,600 abstracts describing algorithms for 15 health outcomes of interest using administrative and claims data. So I'll end the talk with a final commentary. Because Mini-Sentinel is so prominent, there's lots of commentaries put in the literature about this, and this one just happens to be one by Bruce Sadie in the New England Journal of Medicine, entitled Mini-Sentinel and Regulatory Science, Big Data Rendered Fit and Functional. And I'll just point out one quote here. The emerging observational findings from the Mini-Sentinel form part of FDA safety evaluation. So it's not supposed to replace all of FDA safety evaluation, it's supposed to augment it. And as such, can raise or lower the level of concern about the overall risk-benefit profile of particular drugs. And when he says drugs here, I think he means everything that's regulated by FDA. For regulatory science at the FDA, this big data post-marketing capacity is nonetheless transformative. The Mini-Sentinel, which costs about 6 cents per capita per year, protects privacy, maintains transparency, and provides an essential public health service. The current configuration, the data model, the methods development, and the investigative team represents an impressive achievement that deserves ongoing support. So, a very complimentary article in the New England Journal. All right, so I'll just end here and summarize. So Sentinel is a post-market risk identification and analysis system that monitors drugs and biologics under conditions of actual use, not under just the experimental conditions of clinical trials. It uses a distributed database to access multiple data sources while protecting patient privacy. It's capable of rapid electronic analyses, such as those modular programs I spoke about before, prospective real-time surveillance using the prompt modules, and full-scale epidemiology studies with medical record validation. It's supposed to augment but not replace existing federal safety systems. And FDA will post study protocols, analytic programs, and final reports online. And FDA will communicate planned activities and results in a whole bunch of formats. Spoke a lot about the Brookings Institution public meetings and the webinars, the FDA Safety Initiative email distribution list, and of course, scientific publications in peer-reviewed journals, FDA Safety Communications, and the Mini-Sentinel website. So, all right, this is just a slide of our acknowledgements of the many, many people who participated in this, and the list is actually far, far greater than this. It's probably over 200 folks long. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. This concludes the presentation portion of the webinar. If you haven't already entered your questions, please do so at this time so we may review them. If you already submitted a question, there is no need to re-enter it. As we prepare to begin answering some of your questions, we would like to let you know that an archived version of this presentation will soon be available via the FDA website. A copy of the presentation slides is available now at fda.gov/FDA Basics.
Okay, so I just wanted to paraphrase one of the questions that was raised in this public webinar. So let me paraphrase it. Other than the limitations of Mini-Sentinel using administrative data, are there other limitations of this type of analysis? So this is good. I talked about the limitations of administrative data and the need for medical records, and it depends on the type of code used and the type of outcome. There's other things. Because we're a regulatory agency, and what we hope is that Mini-Sentinel and Sentinel, when it becomes Sentinel, will impact the safety of individual products manufactured by individual sponsors. We're limited in the analysis of whether or not the code actually points to a specific exposures or specific drugs. So you can imagine, let's say vaccines with influenza. I think there's over a half a dozen different manufacturers of influenza vaccines. And if you don't have a code that points to a specific vaccine manufacturer, you're unable to make those inferences and bring it back to that specific vaccine. So that's one thing. It's the nature of the exposure codes. And one might do the same thing with drugs. So if you have a whole class of beta blockers, there's only one code for beta blockers available, then you can't link it back and attribute it to a specific one of the specific makers of a beta blocker. Okay, so that's one thing. The second thing is that at the moment, we are very good at detecting both the exposures and the outcomes in the outpatient setting, and then the outcomes, meaning the health outcomes of interest, in the inpatient setting. What you're missing from that is the ability to really finely detect the temporal relationship in the inpatient setting. So we're going to be bringing in a hospital network called Hospital Corporation of America, and we're in the process of integrating that new data partner in here. And that's going to give us access not just to claims data, but full electronic health care data. This is data that's captured for clinical care, not just for billing, but data captured for clinical care. And so there you'll be able to tease out, well, they did get an IVIG dose right before they got this adverse event, instead of just getting it bundled in a discharge summary, which is what we get now. And so stay tuned. I think that database is really going to be important for what we do, since CBER monitors a whole lot of drugs that are given primarily inpatient and intravenously. And once we have that online, we'll be able to do a better job at doing that surveillance. So I have another question here. There are publications which discuss bias in cases of drugs which are subject to restrictive reimbursement policies. So this is a limitation. We monitor drugs that are drugs and vaccines and biologics as they're actually used, and if we are limited to claims data only, we will not be able to be able to detect this. And this happens in, for instance, for vaccines again. I'll use the same example where you're capitated. So it actually doesn't matter whether you record whether you gave a Tdap vaccination or a flu vaccination, because the care of that well child or that well adolescent is capitated anyway. And so there's no incentive to code. So there are economic motivations that go and play into this administrative data. And it actually speaks to why Sentinel is moving into the direction of getting access to a diversity of data sources. And we do need greater access to electronic health records to overcome some of these challenges.
At this time, Michael will take the final question.
Good. So the last question is do you believe the Mini-Sentinel pilot phase has been successful? And I can say absolutely. We've just done in just 5 years to assemble a cohort of 178 million individuals and create a space where we can do repeated analyses and get data back in a span of 4 to 6 weeks, which is just unprecedented on that database. I think is a feat that was previously unimaginable. And if you think about how small the clinical trials are and how costly they are for many of our products, they can be licensed with just a couple of hundred people, and then post-licensure you can monitor and see hundreds of thousands of exposures. You get a sense of the potential of the system. So I think it's been truly remarkable, and we've demonstrated not only that we can get data back quickly, but that if you want to raise the bar of certainty and you want to get access to full medical records, we can validate those exposures and we can validate those outcomes and do very, very high quality analyses.
This concludes today's webinar session from the Food and Drug Administration. We'd like to thank you for participating and hope that you will join us again in the future.